More or less. Erev Tov. You beat me to it. Okay. So we started talking about this very, very interesting case last night. Hopefully we won't be interrupted by the Chutim tonight, for more than one reason. But we started looking at a controversy that occurred about 200 years ago or so. Like I say, the connection to the parasha is that we have the case of Miriam's illness and praying for the sick and Bikur Cholim, etc. So the case was, I mentioned, it's a fascinating case. It appears in a number of different shutim. Again, not so clear exactly what the case was. We have conflicting details, but it occurred in the city of Zlachshov, and there was a person there who was a choleh. There was a choleh sheyesh po sakana. Somebody who was seriously ill. They had seemingly tried everything and nothing worked, and they heard that the Belzer Rebbe, Reb Sar Shalom of Belz, was in a nearby town for Shabbat. So the Rebbe's around for Shabbat. So what are you going to do? You're going to send a kvittel. You're going to send a note to the Rebbe with his name that he can daven for this person. Only problem was, it was Shabbos. So why couldn't they wait till after Shabbos? Or whatever, they couldn't. Maybe he was leaving. Maybe this was serious. So according to at least the way that it's reported in one of the shutim, is that a Jew wrote the name on a piece of paper, traveled outside the tchum, lots of melachot d'oraita that are being done in order to go to the Rebbe to daven for this person on Shabbos. So you'll say, okay, pikuach nefesh toche Shabbat. So Rav Shlomo Kluger didn't think so. I started reading last night the tshuva. Rav Shlomo Kluger was very, very, very upset by this incident. And again, the way that it was reported to him was that it wasn't just somebody who did it, that the Rav of the city, they asked the Rav said, okay, you can go, write the name, send it to the Rebbe, whatever. So he writes very, very, very strong terms. He says, this Rav, he's not a Rav, he's not a Moreh Hora'ah. If this is what he said, he made a mistake not just about this, he made a mistake about everything. Until he is Choser Bo, you cannot listen to him, you cannot listen to his psakim, rejects completely out of hand. He says he is responsible for chilul achar chilul, all sorts of chilul Shabbat. That is Rabbi Shlomo Kluger. Okay, and we can understand when we say pikuach nefesh toche Shabbat. So okay, you go. A person is ill. A person needs medicine. Needs to go to the hospital. Needs to do whatever needs to be done. That's the classic case of pikuach nefesh. To ask somebody to daven for you to perform a melacha d'oraita, which is not directly connected to the refuah, especially when there was a possibility of having it done, asking a non-Jew, etc. So he's not so happy about this. What's fascinating though is that we have a number of different shuvot which address either the same case or a similar case and come to a somewhat different conclusion. Obviously, the Rav of the city was thought a little bit differently. We don't know who he is. We don't have his shuvah necessarily. But I saw, so for example, in the Eshel Avraham, there are two books called Eshel Avraham. There is on the Shulchan Aruch. So one of the classic commentaries of Shulchan Aruch is the Pri Megadim, and the Pri Megadim writes, it goes according to the Magen Avraham. Pri Megadim's commentary on the Magen Avraham is called Eshel Avraham. That's one Eshel Avraham. There's another Eshel Avraham, the Rav of Buchach. So that you'll see it many times in the books, in the footnotes it says Eshel Avraham in brackets Buchach. So it's a different sefer. This is not the Pri Megadim. But he writes the following. So he says in his Shutim, he says like this. He says, Chol ish sakana, lichtov b'Shabbat Kodesh, she'avor rofeh l'choleh she'esh po sakana. Okay, so first he deals with a different case, more clear-cut, easier case. Right, to write to a doctor who's going to, once upon a time, the doctors came to the patients. Nowadays, patients go to the doctors, right? But to send for the doctor to come, so you need to write a telegram, a letter, whatever, to tell the doctor to come, to choleh she'esh po sakana. If you aren't going to write to him, he's not going to come, he's not going to be able to come. So you can write, of course, that's pikuach nefesh, that's fine. He says, don't start writing now a letter saying, I had such and such a symptom and this and this. No, write what you need to say. You say, he's choleh she'esh po sakana, you need to come. Okay, that you can write. Don't do anything more. By the way, the whole sugya, I know there's doctors here and those in hospitals today and the way it works and writing things and what can be written and what can't be written. It's a fascinating discussion. In fact, there is a made-up word in Hebrew, you may know, it's called katvanit or katvaniot, which is made up in Shaarei Tzedek Hospital. So it's a whole profession of katvaniot. On Shabbat, there are many melachot and many things which It's a gray area. It's not direct pikuach nefesh, but it can be done by a non-Jew for the sake of the choles. They have non-Jews who work in the hospital, and they're called katvaniyot because they don't only write, but writing is one of the things they do. For example, you have a patient in the hospital, every half an hour, whatever, you have to check their blood pressure, you have to keep it on the records. So it's not pikuach nefesh right now to go and write down and write down the results, but you need to know. So they have the non-Jewish nurses, the katvaniyot doing it, etc. So he says, so you can write what you need to write for pikuach nefesh, for the doctor to come, that's okay. Ma she'en ken, b'mi shesholech achal ohavo, or mi sheyitpalel be'ado. He says, okay, if you need the doctor to come, the doctor has to treat you, so you can write, that's clear, pikuach nefesh, that's fine. What if you want to write a letter to somebody who you want to come and accompany you, come and spend time with you? Okay. What if you want to write to somebody to pray for you? So he says that's not so clear cut. That's not so simple that you can do. He says, Yesh lomar she'ein heter lichtov. There is no heter to write in this case. V'tzarich li iyun od hetev. He says the matter requires tzarich iyun. So already, okay, he's not talking about this case necessarily. Maybe he was, maybe, but Rav Shlomo Kluger did not say that. Rav Shlomo Kluger said absolutely not. Chilul achal chilul. What are you talking about? There's no heter. Yeah, he says tzarich iyun. I don't think it's allowed, but tzarich iyun. Okay, so there's a little bit of a petach, and then we get to a very, very interesting case. It's brought in the Kaf HaChaim. The Kaf HaChaim quotes from a sefer called Petach Advi. And he says the following. He talks about a time when there was a plague. Once upon a time, we used to read these shuvot, and we used to say, Magefa, the plague. That was something that happened once upon a time. And a few years ago, something called Corona hit. And we said, okay, we understand a little bit about what this Magefa is. These are not, these things might still be relevant. But he says, anyway, there was this Magefa, there was this plague. In Vishnat HaTafkuf Ein Dalet, Shenigef Ruven B'yom Shabbat Kodesh B'toch ha'ir, V'Shimon Achiv Haya B'Kfar. It's not Hilchot Purim, but it's so he says Reuven was in the city and he was afflicted with this ailment on Shabbat, and his brother Shimon was somewhere else in the village. The one Reuven who was sick was very distressed about this. That his brother wasn't there with him. He wanted his brother to know about him and he wanted him to daven for him. Right? It's not the same, we're inundated all the time. We get requests, we get this one, say to him for this one. Okay. Some people, there are some incredible people out there who every time they get a request, they say Tehillim, they add in the names, they have the kavanah. Generally speaking, most people, okay, if it's somebody you know, you're going to daven with more kavanah than somebody you don't know. If it's your brother, you're going to daven with a lot more kavanah than for a stranger. So Reuven wanted Shimon, his brother, to know. He wanted him to be able to daven for him. V'kirot kiso shel hanagiv sa'ad nafsho, kara lesofer. So somebody was there, he called somebody, he heard this, it said, Shichtov ktav leShimon haniskar omed bekfar lo dio, ki nishba achiv v'nigef, שיעשה לו שם בכפר איזה לימוד והתפילה והצעקה והצדקה מבטלין הגזרה. So there the horror was, again, very, very similar to our case. It wasn't the Rabbi, it was his brother, but he asked somebody to go and write a note and write a letter on Shabbat Kodesh to send it to Shimon to go, that they should daven for him. Okay, this is all in the Sefer Petach Hadver, and it says, וכתב שם, דאין בזה ניתנו דיסור. Now, so we started off saying it's chilu achal chilu. We went on to a source that said tzarich iyun, and he says any nudisur, meaning there's no big book, there's nothing to talk about. Of course, it's mutar, there's no problem. Nothing. Well, what could be wrong? It's now 180 degrees. So, the question is, what's going on here? Why are these all different cases, or they're all the same cases? We're not going to say that it's machloket Ashkenazim and Sfardim. It happens to be that the first two sources we wrote were Ashkenazim, and this one is not. But that's not the chiluk. So what is the chiluk, and is there any room? What were they thinking when they went along to write to this to send a note to the Rabbi on Shabbat? So we'll say like this. One more shut who does mention the original case, right, is the Maharsham. That's what the Maharsham says. So he says like this. He says, "Uvda yadana be'imolati bizlatshov she'acholem mesukan u'boto zman haya." He quotes here, right, the Rav Sar Shalom of Bells, משופטי שבת קודש בברוד, והתיר דיין אחד לכתוב על ידי עכו"ם בשבת קודש, שם החולה ועמו ושלח לברוד. Okay, so already, this is why I said at the beginning, he understands, he reports the case differently. He said, what was the case? The case was the Rebbe was in the city, and they got a non-Jew to write down the name and send it. Okay, so it's already different. That's already different. If it's a Jew who's writing, it's an Isur D'Oraita. If it's a non-Jew, it's at most Isur D'Rabanan. Okay, that's already a different case. But he says, Hil Ish HaGaon, Rav Shlomo Kluger, Basal et Hadayan Milorot Od. As we saw, Rav Shlomo Kluger was very upset about this, and he said the Dayan can no longer give a psak. ועוד וכבוד מה נתרעם גם כן על הכותב אומר, okay, that. וכן היה שנתרפא. Anyway, the case was that the person, once after the Rabbi prayed for him, the person was healed. ובכל גיא גבנה אין להכר. So he says we should not be lenient on us. ובפרט בדור הזה אין להכר מכמה טעמים. Interesting. He doesn't explain why. He says, especially in this generation, there's a few reasons. You can think for yourself what the reasons might be. He says we can't be lenient for this. Okay. So one distinction there might be between these different poskim that we saw. That some said that this is very clear to be asur. Some said it's very clear to be mutar, etc. One question is, who's the one who's asking for the name to be written and sent to the tzaddik to pray for it? Rosh Hashanah gives as a shiur on this, and he says like this. He says the distinction is לעניות דעתי נראה. אם החולה ביקש מפורשת לשלוח לצדיק להתפלל עליו, ודאי מותר. If it's the sick person himself who asks for his name to be written and to send, is why? Mishum yutuvei data. We have a concept in halacha that we know, and this comes up many times. By a sick person, what's called yutuvei data, yeshuva dat. Right? We're worried that if the sick person, if their requests are not fulfilled, that it's going to cause the exacerbation of their illness. It's going to lead to a dangerous situation. A person might lose their mind. Okay, we have to understand exactly what the gdarim, what the parameters are of yutuvei dat. But essentially, what he's saying is, if somebody else asks them to write somebody else says, the Rebbe's in town, we've tried everything, let's write your name and we'll send it over. So there we're talking about a skula, we don't have any proof that it will work. Yes, work to bring that into the category of Vadai Pikuach Nefesh, that's problematic. But he says over here, if the sick person himself, right, the person is losing their mind, the person really believes that this is what's going to save them. So it's not because of the fact that it's a skula or whatever, but because of how it's going to affect them, that's going to affect their yeshuva dat, their yutuvei data. So then that's something else. That's a different sugya, and that's something that we can say that there's far more room to be lenient in that case. Okay? In any event, that was the story, that was the controversy, and that's some of the halachot that come out of it. Rabbi Hanania ben Akasha, America, Kashbaru, Zokot Israel, Tzachim Ba'alem Dom Mitzvot, Shlemad Nachvet Mantziko, Yagdir Torah V'Yadir.